There is a new poll that was released about Michigan. Kamala Harris is no longer in the lead in Michigan. And I'm noticing not too many people are talking about this today. And I called it. I figured some people they're probably not going to talk about this poll because it's not good news for Kamala Harris. Yes, it's October 10th. There's still plenty of time. And this is not to say that she cannot win, but this is not looking good for her campaign. Before we look at that poll, I want to show you how things changed. 3 years ago, there was a segment by ABC News called "Could Arab American Voters Swing Michigan?" 3 years ago, this was right before Biden won. I want to do a little bit of a flashback so we can see the difference that has happened. Check this out.
While some state polls have Joe Biden widening his lead over President Donald Trump, the crucial battlegrounds where the election will be fought will likely all come down to voter turnout. That includes states like Michigan, where Trump carried by just 0.25% in 2016. That's why every community of voters could be crucial, including the state's large Arab American population. So ABC's Zareen Shah set out to see what's motivating Arab American voters in Michigan with 21 days till Election Day.
Are you going to vote on November 3rd?
I'm voting on November 3rd.
Okay, thank you so much. You're pledged to vote.
Isra Daraise with the National Network of Arab American Communities is hitting the pavement, working to keep Arab Americans from falling through the cracks.
I feel that a lot of times folks think of Arabs as a foreign policy issue. They think of us as foreign in general, and we're more than that.
They're racing against the clock to convince more Arab Americans.
See how much has changed since then?
To vote, aware their community of thousands could play a critical role in next month's election in Battleground, Michigan. In 2016, out of nearly 5 million votes cast and counted, less than 11,000 votes swung the state to Donald Trump. But that could change this time. Recent state polls already favor Joe Biden. And Michigan is home to over 200,000 Arab Americans, according to estimates from the Arab American Institute. Many of them now energized by opposition to President Trump. Across Michigan, Arab Americans are trying to get their communities' voices heard. Devin Batish works for the nonpartisan Arab American Heritage Council in Michigan, working the phones to get residents in the state registered.
There are a couple different states that have major Arab American populations: New York, Michigan, Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania, California, Florida.
He says their opinion matters not only in Michigan, but also nationwide.
States that I believe Trump carried in the 2016 election that were won only by couple tens of thousands of votes or maybe 100,000 votes, those could be partially swung because of Arab American civic participation in those states.
That participation is frequently credited with giving Bernie Sanders his primary win in Michigan over Hillary Clinton.
There was extremely high turnout for voting. There was pizza being ordered just to keep the lines active and people not to get out of them.
She's seeing the same kind of enthusiasm this time. Right?
Again, this is going back 3 years ago, Arab American voters in Michigan, and see how energized they were to come out and help Biden. Notice what they said there about Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, how they were willing to they wanted to mobilize around Bernie Sanders. So this is another thing, and I want to point this out because a lot of corporate media pundits, they still blame Jill Stein for the reason why Hillary Clinton lost in Michigan. But if you look at the Arab American voters and the numbers that they had in Michigan, the woman was telling you they mobilized around Bernie Sanders. So that right there kind of lets you know the type of candidate that they were looking for, the Arab American community was looking for, versus who Hillary Clinton was. Yeah, Jaya says they didn't know back then. Yeah, there you go.
Registering over 500 Arab Americans to vote in just the last couple weeks.
I definitely think it could make a difference. It's made a difference in 2016.
With immigrants from many countries, there is no monolith Arab American community in Michigan. But topics like inclusion and foreign policy are often big for voters like Qasim Daklala.
I think trying to get to some level of normalcy where the president doesn't want to exclude you from America, I think is something the community is excited about.
Some Arab Americans also sense a double standard in a.
Everybody hear that? Not being excluded. And they came out heavily to support Joe Biden. And who did he exclude? Them. This just goes to show you how things have changed. As much as people are pointing fingers at Arab American voters who do not want to support this administration because of the genocide, look at how enthusiastic they were for Biden in 2020. So whose fault is that? Right? He said inclusion. They wanted to be a part of it. And the response that Joe Biden gave them was to genocide their people. See, people remember. Now I want to show you this new poll. I wanted to go back just to give you an idea of how things have changed. Because now this new Quinnipiac poll is not good for Kamala Harris. Is not good. And I don't even want to hear it. I warned people because when Kamala Harris first announced her campaign, remember she was leading in most of the swing states, and people were like, yeah, she's surging, and everybody was putting coconut emojis online and everything. And it looked like she was just coming in like a superhero. But I warned you that once the honeymoon period would wear off, things would get closer. And here we are. And now Donald Trump has pulled ahead in Michigan. And this is something, again, I noticed a lot of people ain't talk about this today, but on this show, we going there. Pennsylvania, Harris has 49, Trump has 46, other candidates 2%. So this is the Quinnipiac poll. In Michigan, and this is the big one that we're focusing on tonight, Trump has 50%, Harris has 47%, other candidates 2%. And Wisconsin, Trump has 48, Harris has 46, and other candidates 2%. So he had already pulled ahead of her in Wisconsin about a week or so ago, and I talked about that. So we are going to focus on Michigan tonight. How did this happen? Right? How is Donald Trump at 50% in Michigan and Kamala Harris is at 47% in Michigan? She was ahead of him. Could it be that Kamala's attempt to avoid or try to ignore the Muslim voters in Michigan probably has a big impact about that? In fact, I'm going to show you some of the issues that were mentioned during this poll. It shows here, let's go to the issues. The economy. And we're just going to focus on Michigan. The economy. In Michigan, 53% of the voters say Trump and 45% say Kamala Harris. You can see it's the same for Pennsylvania and Wisconsin as well, where for whatever reason with the economy, these voters that were polled prefer Donald Trump over Kamala Harris with the economy. See, it's not just Gaza. This is what I've been trying to tell people. Now, why would that be? That's because she's a part of the current administration with the high grocery prices. And we also had the high gas prices like a year or two ago. So she's still a part of this administration. And this is part of the reason why someone like Barack Obama wanted to open primary. Because the reality is, as much as Kamala Harris has been told to separate herself from Joe Biden, she has not done that. She has not done it. I showed you the clip on The View where she said basically she wouldn't do anything differently than what Joe Biden did. That would include Gaza too, by the way. So she wouldn't do anything differently. So why, you know what I mean? Like, why would people feel that you would be different? The economy, immigration. This is another one. Let me highlight here. Donald Trump is beating her on immigration. In Michigan, 43% say Trump, while 44% say Kamala Harris. Pennsylvania, you see he's ahead, and you see in Wisconsin, he's ahead also with the issue of immigration. Kamala Harris was assigned to the border. That was her task. So people ain't liking this about the immigration. Preserving democracy. The democracy one always cracks me up. And then we're going to get to abortion and I'll go back up. preserving democracy in the United States. This is the one I think that, again, I told you I ain't see too many people cover this poll because this is what is interesting. The Democratic Party are the ones that are pushing the preserving democracy phase, right? And that's because of January 6th. But then why is in Michigan, these voters that were polled prefer Donald Trump over Kamala Harris when it comes to preserving democracy? Now, it's not the same for Pennsylvania and not the same for Wisconsin. She's ahead of him in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin on that issue, but not in Michigan. And then we'll get to the abortion issue. In Michigan, 40% say blah, blah, blah. 40% say Trump, 52% say Kamala. So when it comes to this issue, she is ahead of Trump in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So this is the issue that she is doing very well with, is the abortion issue. The conflict in the Middle East, and this is what I was talking about, Michigan. In Michigan, 53% say Trump, 43% say Kamala Harris. 53% say Trump, 43% say Kamala Harris. Because she's a part of the administration that is doing the genocide. And so you go to Pennsylvania, it's closer in Pennsylvania, 40% Trump, 46% Kamala, but he's still ahead of her. In Wisconsin, 51% Trump, 44% Kamala Harris. Guys, this is not good. And now one thing that I don't do on this show in particular, I don't just show you the polls where she's doing bad. I've also showed you the polls where she was doing really well. I've shown you both of them. But I noticed today people were really quiet about Michigan. And it just, I don't know. Like, I'm telling you, people were pretty quiet about this. And you got to ask why. Now we need to look at what happened before. Don't you just love data? I'm going to get my little data on. Get my data on. Get my data on. Michigan in 2020. We're going to go back to this day in time, and we're going to look at the election final results as well. Biden had 50.6% in Michigan, and Donald Trump had 47.8% in Michigan. Don't forget, Biden had 50.6%. Let's go ahead to October 10th in 2020. So let's be fair. We want to go to today's date, October 10th. Bam. Hope everybody can see that. Look at this graph. On October 10th, it was plus 6.7 for Biden. He had 49.4%. Donald Trump had 42.7%. So Biden had like a pretty good cushy lead over Donald Trump on October 10th in 2020. Right now, Kamala Harris has 47% and Donald Trump has 50%. Kamala has 47% and Trump has 50%. When we go back to this day in 2020, Kamala had 47, Biden had 49.4. She's trailing Joe Biden. Donald Trump had 42.7%. He now has 50%. So is it just me? Is it, I don't know, is it all in my head? Are you guys seeing the same numbers that I'm looking at? So Kamala Harris has a problem. She is behind Joe Biden in Michigan, where he was at this point in time in 2020. He was at 49.4%. She's at 47. Donald Trump is at 50% right now. He was at 42.7% this time in 2020. And I want to show you something else. Pierce said, we see it, Sabby. I want to show you something else. Let's go all the way to Election Day. And I want to show you what happened here. Make it a little bit smaller so we can see. If we go to November 3rd, Biden won with that 50% and Trump won with that 45.8%. But notice what happened here. All of a sudden, Donald Trump's support just shoots up as you get closer to November 3rd. So again, I'm assuming, Biden held he held that lead for quite some time until right about here in September of that year. And then it started to slip away again. And then he had that gap. But then notice how that Trump support started to surge up. So the fact that Trump is already at the 50%, which is where Biden was when he won Michigan, what does that tell you about Kamala? How is it that Donald Trump is already at 50%? He never got to 50% in 2020, not in Michigan. Somebody tell me, let me know. How is that possible? How is that possible unless the candidate is not a strong candidate? How is that possible unless you chose a candidate that was already a part of the current administration? We did not vote for Kamala in the 2024 Democrat primary. So you see that honeymoon has changed. The honeymoon is over. And it is close. You're right, David. David said too close to call. You're right. It is close. But the question that I'm asking is, how is it that Donald Trump was all the way down here in 2020, 45.8%, and now he's at 50% in Michigan? How does that happen? That only happens if the current presidency is not meeting the needs of the people and there is anger. Michigan is not just about the Muslim voters there. That's part of it. But there is also unrest with those that work in the automotive industry because they're not too keen on the whole electric vehicle thing because that can affect their jobs. So you tell me how he was able to not even just bounce back, but he's shot up to 50% compared to where he was before. Is that Jill Stein's fault too? If I remember correctly, didn't the Green Party run Howie Hawkins in 2020? So there was still a Green Party candidate in Michigan, as well as a Libertarian candidate. I think it's always good to go back and look at what happened before. And I've been following it. I'm trying to tell you guys, Michigan don't look good for her at all. And what kills me is like the little bit that she could have done was allowing a Palestinian American speak on the stage at the Democratic National Convention. Wouldn't do it. Wouldn't do it. Little bit that she could have done. Wouldn't do it. That was the bare minimum. And then it was in the war, the ceasefire, and stop sending the arms to Israel. Really? They're saying, stop killing my people. Stop killing my people. Because look at this. Dylan on X says, support for Jill Stein and the Green Party is surging. Americans are using their red line against genocide to vote Green in November. And see, this is why people are mad at us. This is why people are mad with me. I see people attacking Bree, people attacking all of us that are not willing to support Kamala Harris. Because the reality is, look at this, 40%, again, Muslim voters in Michigan, 40% Jill Stein. And then somehow, for whatever reason, 18% for Donald Trump. Is that Jill Stein's fault too? Is that Jill Stein's fault? How is Donald Trump ahead of Kamala Harris with the Muslim vote? So she's at 12% with Muslim voters in Michigan. And that is because it is her administration that's killing the people. And when I told you that genocide is a red line, I meant genocide is a red line. It don't mean, and I think some people thought that Kamala would be different. about this issue than Joe Biden. I warned you she wouldn't. And people said I was being pessimistic. People are like, oh, you're a nihilist. You're being pessimistic. I was right about Kamala Harris. I know who this woman is. I was right about her in 2019. I was right about her in 2020. And I'm right about her today. If you follow her career, you would have known who she was. So these people are asking, they are saying, stop killing my people. Stop genociding my people. And your response is, I will always make sure that Israel has a right to defend itself. And why is Israel always first? And you mentioned the Palestinian people at the end, always at the end. This government supports supremacy. Don't get it twisted. Don't think just because they'll give you little pandering things like a Juneteenth holiday to make you feel good, even though many of us celebrated that anyway before they made it a federal holiday. They'll give you a Juneteenth holiday. They'll kneel in kente cloth. Crazy stuff. But they would implement any real police reform that would stop these cops from killing unarmed Black people. Now you see with the Muslim voters that they're having issue. What did they ask? Stop killing my people. And for some reason, some of you think that is a terrible demand. And I will not sit here and let anybody tell me that you better go with Kamala because Trump is going to be so much worse. My response is you never reward genocide, period. The majority of Americans in this country don't even vote. And there's a reason for that. Because they know this system sucks. They know this government ain't shit. But you have some people that are so focused on, oh, let me see what platforms I can get onto. Let me see what shows I can get onto. So let me continue to kiss up to the Democratic Party and kiss up to Kamala Harris. So maybe she'll come onto my show and then I can be on that level too. I haven't been in this space for 5 years yet, but I'm going to let you know something. A lot of the people are opportunists. A lot of the people just want the money and they want the access. A lot of the people don't really stick on the issues. And you saw that the moment when it came to the genocide and they spoke out against it and said, no, we can't support Biden. Kamala gets in and Kamala Harris, you find out she's saying the same thing and treating the same way. And then they're not angry because of what she's saying. They're angry because she's not lying good. And they're yelling at activists and Muslim voters for not wanting to support the same people who were killing their people. Now, I really wonder, where would some of these people have been during the civil rights movement? Well, this is the system that we have. That's the law today. That's just how it is. So you got to sit in the back of the bus. And so you see them on Twitter shaming activists and going after activists, which is a really bad take. Going after activists and going after Muslim voters instead of going after Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and the Democratic Party for killing these damn people. Now, why would they do that? Because they want to be in the club. Because they want to be able to have those people on their show. Because they want to be able to have Democrat politicians and they want to be a part of that game. And some of them, too, got people that already work in the Democratic Party. They won't tell you that. They showed you who they really were. And for me, I would never, ever say, oh, okay, I know they did genocide, but I'm going to go ahead and support them anyway because I don't want to get Donald Trump. It's an absolute mess. I would never say that. I would never say that. So many people jumped on board. Let's talk about Israel. Let's talk about Gaza. It was popular. It was trending at that point in time. And the moment Joe Biden dropped out and Kamala Harris was pushed in that spot, even though she was saying the same things about this that Joe Biden was, all of a sudden is, I'm going all in on Kamala. Yeah, let's do this. Let me ride that next grift on YouTube. So you have to understand, A lot of these people that are trying to shame you for not wanting to support the genocidal party and the genocidal politicians, I know a lot of these people. I've met a lot of them offline. And I'm here to tell you, half of these people ain't shit. And they know it. But going after activists is not going to help Kamala Harris, bud. Going after people who want to support the third party candidate is not going to help Kamala Harris. We're not going to change our mind tomorrow because your butt hurt because you want Kamala to win so that you can get access and you can continue to grow your show. I'm keeping it 100. You know it's bad when you even have Cenk Uygur, who supports Kamala, supports the Democratic Party. Even Cenk Uygur is calling this out, She is not doing well. Listen to this.
We think of the 7 battleground states. Which one is Harris in danger of losing? I would say Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia. Well, that's almost all of them. And he finishes by saying, I'm not saying she'll lose all 6, but she is in danger. I want you to take note of the fact that it's in the last 48 hours that this has happened. Now, that's why I told you about me saying it over the weekend. Because, guys, there are certain things you do that make a difference, especially in an election this tight. Running towards populism and trying to serve the average American works. Running towards big business and Dick Cheney does not work. It's a bad strategy. Hiding from the press does not work. Saying that you're the same as Biden does not work. Saying Trump's a bad guy. Brother, I mean, we've been doing this for over 10 years. Nobody says Trump's a bad guy more than I do. We got a whole TrumpBrackets.com about all the terrible things that he did. You're not going to outdo me on how terrible you think Trump is. But that's not the point right now. The point is, how do you win this election? And it's not rocket science. You offer the average American things that they need and things that they want. You should be their representative. You should be their fighter. You should be out there fighting for them. And right now, they're not seeing it. So when I saw that they weren't doing the fundamentals right, I said, uh-oh, now she's going to lose the lead. And she has. So I wish to God I wasn't right. Sometimes I feel like Bruno, you know? And you know how if you never saw...
Pause this for a second. So something I want to add here again, one of the few that called it out today. So even he sees what is happening because the reality is, again, like I said, like he supports Kamala, he supports the Democratic Party. But the reality is, as I was trying to warn people, that honeymoon period, eventually it wears off. It happened with Bernie too. Like Bernie had a big hype and then it kind of wore off. And then he had the heart attack. And then after that, like he actually started to grow and surge again. But it does happen. It can happen with any candidate. But the reality is, I have been saying for months that Michigan is an issue. And it just, you know, if you notice corporate media now, they're focusing more on the national poll because that's where she's ahead. So CNN and MSNBC, they're showing you, whoa, she's far ahead of Trump in the national poll. But that's not what wins the election. The Electoral College wins the election. And hey, if you don't like the Electoral College, I am not your enemy. I've complained about the Electoral College for years. But the reality is, you don't win based on the popular vote. You win based on the Electoral College. And now I notice they're not focusing so much on the swing states anymore because she's not ahead in them. Now they're focusing on the national poll because that's where she's ahead. That is manufacturing consent. And I've watched a number of corporate media pundits do this. They're only focusing on the areas where she's ahead, and they're trying to dismiss the areas where she's not ahead. They don't want to tell you that Trump just pulled ahead in Michigan, which I warned you would happen. Let's continue.
That, you know, Disney movie, I think it was a Disney movie. Anyway, it's a animated movie. It's beautiful. It's Madrigal and Incanto is the name of the movie. Anyways, all the kids know we don't talk about Bruno. No. And it's a guy whose magic power is to be able to tell the future, but people hate him for it because he winds up being right, and then they think, oh, did he cause it? And I feel like I'm in that movie, and the establishment keeps saying we caused it when we tell them ahead of time, watch out, iceberg straight ahead. Obviously, we said that in a giant way about Joe Biden, and they didn't listen for a long time. Now they realize it. But by the way, later they'll pretend that Biden was the right candidate. Anyways, but the point is that I wish I was wrong about it, but you could see these trends. We're not wrong. There's a reason why Bernie had a 12-point lead on Donald Trump on election day in 2016. It's not because we're biased towards our side. It's because economic populism works. Hey, I'll tell you when I don't think these days progressive social issues are a winning strategy. So we're super honest about it. I don't know what more we can do to convince them, but let me give you more information. So now this is a CNN reporter, Priscilla Alvarez, talking to Dana Bash on air. And she says, what's also creeping in now is that anxiety. The reason for that is because these polls are not really moving despite multiple battleground blitzes, despite the opportunities she has had across media outlets. Now, let me pause there to clarify. The polls are moving a little bit towards Trump, and a little bit takes it from a small lead she had to a small lead he has. And that makes a giant difference. They're saying it's not moving in a positive direction for Kamala Harris. That's why the Democrats are the ones that have the anxiety, as she's explaining here. She says, quote, there's still not a lot of movement from voters who are moving more towards her versus former President Donald Trump.
And honestly, he mentioned the interviews, and I feel like the interviews are actually not helping her. Typically when you're doing more interviews, that's going to help your campaign, right? That's going to give you more eyeballs. But it doesn't seem to be helping her. And she's done a number of interviews, and she's gone on a number of podcasts, and it just doesn't seem, again, one of the worst things I think Kamala Harris did, aside from the Israel-Gaza issue, is that she never found that way to distinguish herself from Joe Biden. And when she went onto The View, and she stated that she wouldn't do anything differently than what Joe Biden did the last 4 years. That's terrible. And when you tell people, oh, I think I will have a Republican in my cabinet, which we can argue whether or not Joe Biden does, but I thought he did have a Republican in there. But again, it's like, you're not offering anything different. The reason why Bernie Sanders was able to poll the way that he does, and he had so much energy, is because he represented change. He was bringing forth like the economics to the people, calling out the billionaires. Again, he represented change. Kamala Harris had the opportunity to be a change candidate, and she totally blew it. She doesn't want to be a change candidate. She's playing it slow, and she's trying to be like status quo and do what's more palatable so that she can win over some of the moderate Republicans. When people are dealing with economic issues in this country, you got a homelessness rate that's increased over 25% the past couple of years. More people getting evicted, the grocery prices, which she acknowledges herself. So you had to be a change candidate. It is October 10th. I doubt she's going to move over to change because she's touting Goldman Sachs. She's hanging out with Liz Cheney, a freaking neocon, which I think you can imagine she would probably put Liz Cheney in her cabinet. So there you go with the wars. So you know how that's going to go. That's why Bernie was so popular, because he represented change. Even Barack Obama got this right. He didn't do it once he got into office, but he got it right when he was running. Now, this is not to say that Kamala can't win. She could still win. She could still, in some way, shape, or form, pull this out and win. We won't know until Election Day. But it is going to be very hard for her to win without Michigan. And that's not the fault of Jill Stein. That's not our fault. That is her fault.
In fact, I had one source describe it to me this way, quote, people are nervous. They know the polls are tight. A lot of us are having these flashbacks of 2016 too. We know when it can go the wrong way, and it can still feel fresh. So Now a lot of people are talking about 2016, and it's not just guys like me who are warning, watch out. Okay, it's even the establishment types are beginning to see those polls, and they're getting super nervous. So I'm going to give you those in 1 second here, but one more piece of data, and that is about the markets. So you can say, hey, you know, the markets isn't polling, and I don't believe the markets. You can say anything you like, okay? But the reality is people are putting their money behind this. So it's not like just knuckleheads going, what's the big deal? No, they're putting their money where their mouth is. And it's not end all be all, but it is a factor. And by the way, you know what Polymarket was super right about? That's the market that I use. That's one of our sponsors. But I look at it all the time because
it's one of their sponsors. Get that? I don't really look at Polymarket because it's betting odds, and I don't do the betting or whatever. But some people look at Polymarket and they look at it as a poll. It's not poll, it's betting odds. So just keep that in mind if you do look at Polymarket.
It's been right on a lot of things. And the thing that it was most right about was Tim Walz. And I didn't think that she had any chance of picking him. And when I see something, predict something better than I do, I go, whoa. Yeah, and that might be a little bit of my arrogance to say the least, but I'm just being honest with you guys. And so, and markets can often tell you where the crowd is going, and they might know something you don't know, or they have a sense of it. Remember, everybody's in their bubble, and this gives you the whole national bubble. So anyway, I'm on polymarket.com. Now, Kamala Harris had taken a small lead, and I was like 51-49, or I was like, I don't think so. I think Kamala had a bigger lead back then when I was talking about it 2 weeks ago. And even a week ago, I thought, you know, right around now, Wednesday-ish of last week, I thought she's got a lead, and I thought there was some chance she could expand it, but then she's done everything wrong since then. And now it's 53-46. That's not that close for Trump, obviously. So that's a 7-point lead for Trump. So now the markets are feeling like, oh, he's taking the lead. So now let's get to the numbers. This is Michigan, where 2 weeks ago, and even a week ago, she had a lead, and 2 weeks ago, it almost started to feel comfortable. Like, look at this, 925. So that's right around 2 weeks ago. She was up by 3 points in two different polls in Bloomberg and Cook Political Report. Very credible polls in Michigan. And that's when I started to go, oh, okay, looks like she took the lead.
But if you would have been listening to what Butch Ware said about those internal polls, you would have seen that wasn't the case. And that's the thing. Butch Ware did try to warn people about the internal polls.
Here we go. And maybe she could add to it. Maybe it'll fluctuate back and forth. I don't know what's going to happen in that regard. But then, boom, now last set of polls coming in, Trafalgar, Trump +2, MIRS, MI News Source, Trump +1, Quinnipiac, very credible, very legitimate, +4 for Trump. Oof.
And that's the one that I just showed you was the Quinnipiac poll. I don't show the Trafalgar poll because that leans more towards Republican Party. I am trying to be fair with the polls here, but Quinnipiac tends to be pretty credible. So that's why I showed you that one tonight. But it's just a reality, folks. And even Nate Robinson, who is a Democrat, supports Democratic Party, and I thought was supporting Kamala Harris at one point. He said, if Harris loses Michigan, she will have no one to blame but herself. Although I'm sure many Democrats will learn nothing and blame voters as they did in 2016. Yeah, so that's coming from Nathan Robinson. So I think that's saying a lot. Like, holy crap, I don't expect him to say that type of thing. But it's happening, folks. And I told you that it was coming. I told you that honeymoon was going to go away. I warned you about the support. Muslim voters, majority in Michigan, are supporting Jill Stein. And if you're new to the show, you'll know I will be voting for Jill Stein. And I don't live in Michigan, but I will be voting for Jill Stein. And I think, again, for people wondering what is the goal there? Well, the goal is to try to get Jill Stein to the 5%. So that way she can, again, grow, the Green Party, et cetera, which is needed. They need the resources. They need the funding. But the reality is, considering it's 20 plus days to the election, that's not looking good for Kamala. It's like you're almost better off being behind in the beginning and coming, rising later on closer to the election than starting out high and then sinking.